Need to wait to accept the invite and then I can call him. Ah, that's not hard. Hey. Hello, can you hear me? Okay, I mean, it's fine that you can hear me, but, well, I don't hear you, so that's a little problematic. Maybe it's a Discord issue, I don't know. Oh well, if you do not have the microphone, then it's gonna be hard. I mean, it's really gonna be hard. Like, oh well, probably never said something about micro requirement. But yeah, by just simply exchanging message, it's not gonna be easy because even, well, I will check if I can spectate you first. But even if I can spectate your games and such, then it's gonna be hard because how I'm doing things with majority of people and most of the lessons how they look like. So the student would I would simply see the game, so spectate the game via Steam, and then I would like the student would say to me how would he play the turn and what's the correct play and what's not and such. So that's probably not gonna work with text. I mean, if you don't have a mic, then yeah. But well, anyway, I will still check if I'm able to spectate. So if you could launch your Shadowverse, then at least I can try to get into the Steam. So maybe then I can at least answer some questions. So it's not gonna be in vain. Okay, let me see. Okay, I send the request. And yeah, I should probably be able to, because the announcement is there, it's loading. Okay, still loading for me, so just wait a second. Okay, it loaded for me. So at least I can, right now I can see your screen. So I see the 36,000 points and such, that you have an Neptis deck. Well, but once again, if you do not have a microphone, then the communication is not gonna be as smooth as it could be. But it's still fine. I mean, you can still text, so I will just copy-paste the questions, and I will just try to cover them. So at least we can do this. Also, you can paste me the deck list, or rather the deck you are playing right now, or maybe at the moment, like the list you have, so I can check if you can tune it somehow. Also, it would be great if you could write if you have how many vials you have, or at least show. So do you have some spare vials for modifications of the deck, and if you can do something with it. Also, my English is not perfect, obviously, so if something is not clear to you, just feel free to write it and tell me. Well, that's not gonna be easy with him with muted microphone. I didn't expect that, like, oh, it wasn't mentioned at all before. Can't do much about it though. So communication via voice chat is probably not the way to go. Okay, so for as archetypes, it would be the best if you could just send me either the deck code or just show deck list, but the deck code is probably more efficient. Just show me the decks you have. Because I guess it's gonna be the best if I just go over the questions you send me. Just playing ladder with like one side texting and one answering. So if you would text the place and such, it can take a lot of time between decisions. So it would probably in the end lead to some losses thanks to the lack of fluent communication. I don't know how to say it. Because there is also input lag between text messages, also the things that you have to type your words instead of say them, so it takes just longer time than it's supposed to be. So if we would go on ladder right now, it wouldn't be so efficient as it could be. Also, the decks you have to show me, that would be great. Like I said, if you could show me deck codes, because then I can get a scope of some questions that you said. So about, for example, the question where you ask about the mulligans. What should you mulligan? Well, that depends on the deck. So every deck needs different set of cards that are good for keeping and mulliganing. Możesz pisać po polsku na czacie, możesz pisać po polsku, możesz po angielsku, w dowolny, Sigford, nie ma problemu, tak, dowolny język. Tutaj okazuje się, że druga strona po prostu nie ma tego, nie ma mikrofonu, o czym nie miałem zupełnie informacji. Teraz jak ktoś nie ma mikrofonu, to dość słabo będzie się komunikować z nim, tak po prostu. Okej. Okay, under deco. Okay, I got the deck code. So it's 944. Okay, so I see it's shadow, so it's just neutral shadow, some shadow cards. Okay, all in all, I guess I should start with asking you, what is your current goal, like right now? Do you aim to just, I don't know, learn some decks? Do you aim to go to Masters, to Grandmasters? Do you want to collect some, I don't know, and learn to play word decks? Or, well, just any goal you have in your mind. So, I can just get a scope of it. Because I believe Torte sent me something, but Torte just answered that Bloodcraft and Heavycraft to reach Masters from AA. So... okay, get to Master before expansion is a start. So... that's obviously a good goal. So, it's a fine one. But like all of these goals, it have a little flaw in the reasoning. So, that's like the basic principle of... majority of card games and all of the games that require grind. So you don't aim to just become a specific rank. So for example, I don't know how many card games you play, but let's assume that there is a rank that's comparable to Masters in any card game, and that's a goal for a lot of people. So instead of just going, I want to become the rank, I want to become this rank and such, it should be, I want to become better, because it's not like the rank make the place. Player can be ranked Master, can be ranked Grandmaster, can be ranked AA, can be ranked D, but for example, rank D can still be better than the Grandmaster if he's a good player, but maybe, I don't know, he didn't play ladder too much, or he's just efficient from the other card games, or maybe he's prodigy. So ranks doesn't matter too much on the long run, it's rather the player. So the simple course is like that. If a player becomes better and makes better plays and wins more games, then the rank will eventually come. But you cannot just mindlessly try to aim to get rank, because it's not gonna take you anywhere. It doesn't have any inherited goals in it. So yeah, but getting to Masters should be easy. You're like what right now, 14,000 away from Masters, so it's around 140 wins more than losses. Well, depends on the series, depends on how many opponents with 150 points you get, and depends how your losses are gonna be, because sometimes you will get minus 70 for loss. But all in all, it shouldn't be too hard if you keep playing. But, well, another questions about the ladder and goal. So, why are you playing Shadow? Like, is it because you like the deck? Or is there any other reason behind the deck? And the deck list, just in particular. Okay, I will try to get the chat working in the studio mode, so then I can see the conversations and such. It will be easier on me, obviously. Yeah, if I do it like this, zoom it out and on. Przechwytywanie okna. Okay, there we have it. The glorious chat. Okay, it's not glorious yet. It's still there, and you probably can notice it on the ekrán. Okay, so when you said you didn't thought about it, it's a solid deck and you had a lot of success in when playtesting. So, what do you mean by playtesting? Just playing ladder, or you actually play it in some tournaments, or test against another player? And is it a deck that you assembled by yourself, or you just net deck this? Assembled it by yourself. Okay, so the question here is, do you have any other experience from any other card games? Like, did you play other similar card games? Maybe different ones. So, for example, I know Hearthstone, Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, TCG, or is Shadowverse your first game when it comes to card games? Because I'd like to know, so then I can make easier transitions and comparisons. Okay, Shadowverse, your first card game. So, the thing with card games, and it's something that people refuse a lot, and they do not share opinion too much, but it only comes to the people who have no idea how the card games goes. So, in every card game, you picked Hearthstone very along the way, fine. But coming back to this, because Hearthstone have a lot of similarities, and in Hearthstone it's true indeed. And once again, it's it's true for most of the card games, and for some extent to all of the games where variance is included. So, for example, for card games, you shouldn't do your own decks. And it's not like because, well, I'm saying it's in generic because maybe you have a lot of knowledge and such, but for usual player, just for a player who just plays a game and such, you shouldn't build your own decks. The best idea is to just copy decks that a pro player plays, so there is a lot of lists in the internet that you can find, and just getting an efficient list that is tested already by some players that is proven to work, will already rise up your win percentage. Because the thing is, a lot of players try like, okay, I will build my own deck, and I will build it because I like it, because I think the cards are working and such, and they make a lot of mistakes in the deck building process, because they don't know the extent of the meta, they don't know how to build in mana curve, and it goes like this. Like, that's the basic principle that I tell on like every session, because it's so common. It's such a common trap with building your own decks. So every good player I mean, every good deck builder will be a good player, but not every good player will be a good deck builder. Because to be a good player, you just require some knowledge. You need to know how to pilot one deck. So, for example, you can master one deck and be efficient with it. And if you plan to play tournaments, for example, like YCG, you just need to master 2 decks. So you just master 2 of your own decks, and that's it. But there are 7 classes in the game. And while building the deck, you should think about every class in the game. So you should think about every class in any given game, every card that exists in the meta, about all of the tech cards that are present in a current mode. So that's not something that one can achieve easily, and combining the mana curve is another thing that is a really complex task and require a lot of knowledge. So without it, building your own deck is not a good idea. And the situation comes like this, because in your deck, I see you have Grimnurs, which are not that great at the moment. You have Grimnurs and Angelic Knights, so that's what caused me to ask that question. Same goes for the Goblin Breaker Tina. I mean, it might work right now, but it's far from like the efficient build. Because right now there are other builds that are working better. Also, there are other classes that are working better. So, for example, if you want to grind faster, so let's even assume that your goal is still get to Masters, but, well, getting to Masters is still gonna be achieved by just getting better. The best idea is to just pick the best deck that works for ladder. So right now there are some meta decks that are working, that are really fine for the task. One of them is Neutral Haven. So there is a lot of Neutral Haven in the internet, and they are really doing a lot of good stuff. While the other one would be probably a Shadow, but a more mid-range version, not a neutral one. Because Neutral Shadow have some synergies, but they fall off. They fall off a little, while because of the Ectar nerf and what's not, and lack of some neutral synergy, while other still prevailed and are really good. So I can try to find the deck, because I guess I had it in some... I had it, so I will send you a really good list, like a really good comparison. So meanwhile, I will check for it. I will look at the questions one more time. So, is there any specific archetypes to be cautious about in AA? So, that was the first questions. So, no, there is nothing like you have to be cautious about deck X in A rank. It's not like you go into the AA or go to A rank, to B rank, D rank, Master, Grandmaster. There are no such things as specific archetypes in tires, because tire have, rather I would say, they have no influence on the meta, and they fluctuate a lot. So the meta just changes with entire game. Because right now, because how the game look like, with a lot of free packs and a lot of free stuff that you get as a new player, a lot of new players will just build a full deck from scratch, like 1 week. In 1 week after picking up the game. So they will just build a deck and they will play them. And it doesn't matter if they are in D or even if they are in the beginner rank, because someone might just grind arenas and then he will get to the level, entry level of the top tier decks. So there are no such things as specific archetypes should be cautious about. It's rather you should be always wary of what decks are played in the tournaments right now, because people will always copy what decks were efficient and what decks were successful in tournaments. So which decks had a lot of wins and which ones were favorable players. But another mistake that is really easy to avoid, the best place to actually net deck are Japanese sites. So I don't know if you know Japanese or not. So if you don't know, you can still follow some sites, you can still follow some players on Twitter, because they also they also screen some decks in English. I mean, well, just by knowing a lot of images, you should be able to assemble a deck from the scratch. Just by looking at them, because Shadowverse have really distinctive art for a lot of cards, so they're easy to recognize. And same goes for the sides. So deck list from Rage, deck list from JCG. These are the deck lists that you should look forward, and these are the best to copy. But of course they are also imported into the West. So I believe it was on the Begum side that you could find them, but let me double check. I believe Eldynamite, so Grandmaster Doge, as he appears on Reddit, was posting them a lot recently. Okay, let me find it one more time. Okay, I found them. So this is the most recent list with the decks from JCG. I will send you a link on Discord. Wait a second. Okay, so here's the link, and here you can simply check that a lot of decks that are presented here are just repeating itself. So you see neutral Stormhaven, then you see another neutral Stormhaven, and there is another neutral Stormhaven. That simply means that neutral Stormhaven is popular, and the fact that it places in so many decks and so many winning archetypes already speaks for itself. So it's a really good sign that the deck works and that the deck can beat anything. Another thing that you can consider is a lot of Ram Dragons, a lot of Control Bloods, which appeared like out of nowhere before, like because before that it was a lot of aggro and bats. And then you can see some decks that are like one-shots, so Neutral Sword or Aegis Heaven. You can see like one copy of the deck, second copy of the deck, and that's it. Same goes for the decks that are not used. So, for example, Neutral Forest. So, instead of picking up a deck that's like cherry in the entire brute, you should just take the deck that's common, and that's just achieving a lot of places. A lot of high places that have a lot of representation and that's stable. Because by just copying the deck from the top tiers, you're already ensuring that your win rate will rise. Because the good deck can carry a player who is not competent even higher. Because if a bad player picks a bad deck, then well, disaster happen. But if a bad player, or even a decent player, who is not a great player, but let's say he's a decent player, just for example, picks up an awesome deck, the awesome deck still works, still have synergies, and still have a lot of stuff that can make up for the player flaws. So yeah, just by picking a better deck, you can already rise up your win percentage. So that's one of the things. Another, what kind of class would excel in rank without suffering too much from playing second? So that's really tricky question, because at current metagame, I don't know if you saw the Shadowverse portal reports. They're making them from time to time on Reddit. I should say they are making it on some Japanese site, then they are translating into Reddit, but whatever, the sense staying the same. All in all, most of the classes have high win percentage when going first, and the win percentage is smaller while going second. So the really good example is just looking at the statistics, and there you will have your answer, which deck have the best win rate while going second. The other thing is, it really varies from deck to deck. So there are decks that will have some comeback mechanics, and the decks that can do it are the decks like Neutral Stormhaven. So this deck is really good when going first, but if you go second and just go neutral card, neutral card, neutral card, and then on the Evo turn, so on the turn 4, you play something neutral. You can also play your Eagle, for example, so the dude that gets slower with his mana cost for every neutral card play, so Eagle Man, his 6 mana. Same goes for the Lion of the Golden City. So all the decks that are good when being second are the decks that can make a really huge play on the turn 4. Because if you are playing a deck that can only play, for example, one creature, so let's go over the list you sent me before. Well, in the deck you sent me before, well, I have to open it once again. On the turn 4, your like best creatures are Goblin Breaker Tina and Alice. So while Alice is still decent, the Goblin Breaker Tina is better. But Goblin Breaker Tina, her Evo stats are bad. So unless you are facing a neutral deck, she won't be as great evolution as it could be. So on the turn 4, you either want to have awesome evolution card, or you want to have like two of the creatures. So the turn 4 is the most important when going second. But the other thing you have to consider, when you are going first, you also want to have really good cards. So just to sum it up, the best decks to go second, well, the best tip is probably not ever go second, because this game is too heavy in favoring the player going first. That's unlucky part of the game, but I hope they will fix it one day. Right now, as the meta is as it is, player going first have inherited advantage just from the lucky draw. But the same goes for Gwent. If you ever played Gwent, then the player going second is in a lot of in a better place when starting the match. But anyway, the best class to probably excel in rank without suffering too much from playing second would be Shadow and Haven. Because if you want to play Sword already have an awesome 4-drop, and that's Flora Fencer, but Flora Fencer is not played anymore in most of the decks, because she is only good when going second. If you go first and have Flora Fencer, she is not good. She is terrible to play on the turn 5. Of course, sometimes she will be able to bring back the board and just swarm the board with creatures, but more often than not, she is a garbage when you are player number 1. So that's probably the main reason why a lot of people cut her from the decks. Okay, let me see the next question. Okay, give me a second. Okay, so I guess it would be fine if I just take them onto the screen, because well, if you can't text, then at least I can catch up the window. Okay, that's it, and the questions can be in the middle of the screen. That's also fine. Obviously I need to bring them down before emotes. Okay, so I got them. So, as for what mindset should you have in playing aggro mid-range front control? Well, there is no given mindset, depending from the archetype, because it's rather not a mindset. Your mindset should always be just to like try to win or never give up. I mean, of course, you will give up in the games you are certain then you will not win. So there will be some games, and when you become proficient in judging the situation, then you can just judge. Okay, even if though you have, for example, 15 life, 16 life, even 20, but you see you are gonna lose, well, it's better to concede, because then you won't waste time. But more often than not, playing to win is the best mindset that you can have, and if you didn't read the book about it, then I can send you a link after the session. I don't know, maybe you read Playing to Win by Serlin. It's one of the more common book guides. It's also another thing that I recommend to barely like anyone who is playing card games and just computer games in general, because this book was written like over 10 years ago, something like that, and it was meant for fighting games, but it just touched a lot of approach, a lot of mental aspects, and a lot of things that you can just get straight while playing games. So, I don't know, did you read this book in your past, or maybe you know it, or if not, then I will just send you a link. Okay, you haven't read it before. Fine, so when I get the link under my account, then I will send it to you. But I will go over the next one. So in general, more specifically during turn 3, if the opponent has a 1-2 follower, would be better to trade it with a 2 play point, 2 and 2 when playing second. Okay, so assuming blank board state, like it's only 1-2 and 2 and 2 from your side when playing second, obviously that's fine, because in this game, like in Hearthstone, when you have creatures on the board, you are the one who decides how the combat will go. So the thing is, if you are defending player, so for example, if it's your opponent turn, you cannot do anything. He is gonna choose how he's gonna attack, how he's gonna defend, not defend, how he's gonna interact with your creatures, how he's gonna cast his spells and such, and the same goes for you. When it's your turn, your opponent have no influence. So that's why combo decks like Dimension Shifts can actually work in this game, because when you are able to cast Dimension Shift, your opponent have nothing to interrupt you. So you are free to cast Dimension Shift, your followers, and then take additional turn, and then take another additional turn, and that's it. So in this situation, it's really simple. If you are able to trade efficiently, so you would not fall behind in tempo, because it depends from deck to deck. In some decks, you want to go face as much as possible and leave the trades for your opponent. In some decks, you will just want to trade because you know that you will be behind if you don't do it. So you cannot just judge in vain, like, if we only had this knowledge that it's a 1-2 follower and it's a 2-2 and player going second. So in theory, the player with 2-2 creature should go face, because he's getting his evolution point first and his opponent cannot trade into his 2-2 efficiently. But that only comes without another approach. So when we take the approach into account of it, if you know, for example, if we add more aptitudes, so let's say this 2-2 minion is Shadowcraft, and this 1-2 follower is from Neutral Haven. You want to trade. You will want to trade, and the reason is if this 1-2 follower is from Neutral Tribal, then your opponent might actually play something like Wise Merman, and Wise Merman would buff this 1-2 follower and make it a clean trade. So that's a situation which you would want to avoid. So if you had the knowledge that your opponent is playing neutral deck, for example, then obviously this 2-2 would go to trade. If it's not a neutral deck, or if it's not a deck that runs Lyrial, for example, or Angel of the World, or any other pingers, so when you are aware of the cards that might come in, then you will be able to decide, is it better to trade or is it better to go face? So that probably answers the questions, because, well, without specific directions, so what class it is, and with only knowing the power of the followers and who goes first, who goes second, it's just not possible to answer objectively to this question. And it actually changes to another question: what should you mulligan playing first and second? So that depends on your deck, but most of the decks will run 2 drops. So if you know you are playing tempo deck, and a lot of decks in this game are tempo based, you always want to have a 2-drop in your hand. If you have a 1-drop, perfect. But if you do not have a 1-drop and you do not have a 2-drop, keeping a hand that have only, for example, 3+ cost cards is really terrible for your game state. These games in Shadowverse are really fast, so skipping your first turn is fine, because, well, a lot of decks just run Goblins or Mermans or Blazing Breaths. If you're going second, then as a Dragoncraft you can answer with a Blazing Breath, or with the Insight as a Runecraft, or with Angelic Snipe as a Runecraft. So there's a limited amount of cards that you can play on the turn 1. Fairy Circle also comes to mind when playing Forestcraft. But for the turn 2, most of the decks will have their core plays on the turn 2. So if you're aggro deck going first, you want to play your 2-drop on the second turn. So 2 mana 2 and 2 is already creating a pressure on your opponent, and it's something that he would have to defend about. When you are playing neutral on turn 2 and then going with buff or going with something on turn 3, or warding it. For example, you had Angels in your deck, like 3 mana 2 and 2 ward that gives +1/+0. That's also a play that can just snowball. So if you play a 2-drop follower, then 3-point play follower, then you can just snowball and slam your opponent. But without play for turn 2, more often than not you will lose the game if you do not play anything in your first 3 turns, assuming your opponent is just doing his plan. And the reason for it is, if it's a dimension shift, then he will just get a lot of free time without being interrupted. He will gain a lot of time to spell boost his spells, to find his dimension shifts, to find his Merlins, find his Flame Destroyers, all the other cards that can disrupt you. If it's aggro, then, well, aggro will just put up a creatures on the board, and then it will devour you. Like, even if you play something on the turn 3 and 4, if you skip turn 2 and you are going second, then it's gonna be terribly hard to come back because of the inherited power of the player number 1. Already mentioned that, but, well, it's really good to just keep in mind that some games will be lost without your influence. So sometimes you will have a hand that will brick, sometimes your opponent will just draw better, and it's nothing to be mad about, because this game is constructed like this just to favor player number one. That's flaw in design, but with every expansion they are trying to fix it. That's a really good thing. Okay, so also, well, just closing out this question. So it depends on the deck, and once again, it depends on the knowledge of your deck list, of your opponent possible decks, because if you see a class, you probably already assume what can it be. So if you see a Swordcraft, right now you can just assume it's Ambush Swordcraft, because it's the most common archetype. When you see Haven, you can assume it's a neutral Haven. But the things are going different when you are going versus something like Rune, because as Rune, there are like 3 efficient archetypes at the moment. It can be Daria Rune, so it can be Daria Tempo, it can be Dimension Shift, and it can also be Airfreight Rune. So there are like 3 common archetypes, and even within the archetypes there are differences. It can be Enchanted Blade Mage, Dimension Shift, or it can be Flame Destroyer Blade Mage. It can be Airfreight Aggro, it can be Airfreight more controlish. And there are also some versions of really different archetypes that you will also meet on your way. So, for example, Queen of the Dread Sea, Dimension Shift, or the Airfreight with a lot of neutrals. Also, Neutral Runecraft is another deck that's really common, and even after the Fallis nerf, you can still meet remnants of the deck and players playing it. So, when you just mulligan versus any given class, just try to mulligan versus the most common archetype, because it's the most logical thing to do. If you mulligan versus archetype that's, well, it's not a majority of the archetype, or it's not the most popular one, then it's not gonna do you any good. Because if you mulligan versus most common archetype and your opponent turns out to be a minority, then well, the chances are your hand is still gonna be good against it, because mulligan hands usually include a lot of early drops and a lot of power, and even if you had some tech card, it's only 1 card. So that's the most logical thing to do, just to mulligan versus assuming your opponent is playing the most common archetype. But once again, that comes with a knowledge of what common decks are. So would you mulligan based on your deck objectives more than opponent decks? That depends on what kind of deck you are playing. Obviously, you just want to get your best curve instead of get answers, but once that goes with the deck you are playing. So if you are playing Dragoncraft, you want to get ramp, but you also want to get removal, because you know that most of your opponents will play an early game drop, so they will play a 2 mana 2 and 2, or they will even play a 1 drop. So if you save that Blazing Breath in your hand, that's gonna come in handy. But if you are playing a deck, combo deck, so Dimension Shift, or Queen Shift, or even Ginger, or whatever, Ginger Airfreight, there are also decks like this. So with the Runecraft and the combo decks, you want to keep your pieces of combo. So with the Dimension Shift, most of the time you will just keep Dimension Shift in your hand. Most of the time you will also keep Merlin in your hand, especially when going second. Flame Destroyers, you would rather mulligan them and try to find Dimension Shifts, once again. But with the neutral decks, aggro decks, mid-range decks, you just want to find really good curve for you. But with all of these decks also come some choices. So if you are playing versus class that's known to be aggressive, so if you are playing versus Sword, and assuming you are playing Shadow, or maybe other Sword, there are cards that deal 3 damage on the turn 2, so it's Shield of Flame, I believe it was called Shield of Flame, 2 mana deal 3, if you have Ambush Creature deal 6, and for Shadow you have Zombie Party. So you have these 2 cards, you have removals, and for Bloodcraft you have Hungering Horde and Trousery Claw. So once again, these are the cards that are worth keeping when you know you are playing versus aggressive class, and in the moment that you will need to remove something from the board immediately, because otherwise your opponent will go hard on you. Same goes with playing Haven, whatever the class is spelled. So this class have some banish effects. So banishing simply makes exile a creature so it doesn't activate abilities which would activate normally when they die. So for example, keeping banish stuff versus class like Shadow is also a good thing. So for example, Blackened Scripture is a really efficient removal, and it can be just usually kept in your hand. So I guess that close out the mulligan section unless you have something you want to ask more about it. And then I can go to the other question. Okay, not at the moment, fine. Okay, so the next one... In terms of situational analysis, how do I react to the opponent? Centered on anticipation of big plays. Okay, so it goes for the latter. So it's a composition of both. So you have to play... I mean, that's the skill that you will acquire only by playing a lot of games. There are things where you will just know what's gonna happen, but that all goes with knowledge of the meta. So if you know, for example, the most common builds, the most common decks, and what plays can be played by your opponent, then you will play it around it. So anticipation of Vector turn 7, that's a really good one. That's a really good example, because most of the Shadow decks, unless it's Neptis, will play Ector on the turn 7. It doesn't matter if you assume, well, maybe they didn't draw it, but you still have to be wary about it, and then you have to create a scenario in your head, like what's gonna happen if he plays Ector, or what I'm gonna do when this happens. And it goes for all of this stuff. For example, playing versus Dragoncraft. You play aggressively, but then you have to stop yourself. What's gonna happen if my opponent plays Bahamut next turn? What's gonna happen when my opponent plays Israfil next turn? But you also have to rate your hand, so you just have to judge with both your hand and anticipation. So you will just create amount of scenarios depending on what he's gonna play, like what you think he's gonna play, and then what you can do about any given play. And the best possibility is just to think about it efficiently. So what play is gonna give you the best outcome considering the cards your opponent plays before you. So you just well, there's like 90 seconds in any given turn, so 75 for I believe it's 90. If it's 75, then whatever. But assume, okay, let's assume just for the simplicity, it's 16 seconds. I don't know the exact amount, but like I said, let's just assume for simplicity. So you can spend 45 seconds, so it's 75%, you can spend 45 seconds of your turn time just to think about the scenarios and the things and the future turns and the evolution points and just the common plays that your opponent can play. You can create different scenarios with the cards that you have in your hand and the cards that you might acquire. So if you play Forestcraft, for example, you can get a Goblin Mage. Goblin Mage in most of the builds will get you only the Rhinoceros. So, well, that's a combo deck after all, but these are also the things that you have to consider. What's gonna happen when I play this, and this. Same goes for the Baphomet, but Baphomet is more of a random card, so it's better to play him early in the turn if your turn involves getting a random outcome. Because the random outcomes will also determine how the rest of your turn is gonna be played, and what plays and to what extent you can expect doing things. So, just playing random cards, if all of your scenarios are assuming random card, just play it first, because then your later scenario might change. So, just to sum it up, the analysis and how to react to your opponent, you just need to know the meta. That's the only thing you have to know. You just have to know the decks, because if you don't know what kind of card you may expect, then you have to play on your own. But because there will be scenarios where your opponent is playing a deck that you totally didn't expect. There will be examples where your opponent will be playing cards that you had no idea exist because, well, maybe they are too bad, or they will trollish, or they are just fancy and no one is using them, or everyone forgot about them, or there are things from the past. So you cannot play against something you are not aware of. So in these situations, you just play on yourself. You just play your creatures, you just attack efficiently, and do the best trades. But if you are aware of your opponent deck archetype, if you know what are the most common cards in his deck and what are the most common plays that he can make. So For example, turn 5 from Dragon. For 5 mana, he can do Draconic Fervor, he can do Sibyl of the Waterworm and Evolve, or if you have more mana, he can do Breath of the Salamander. So you always try to distribute your creatures, to distribute your plague points and such in a way that will always be efficient for you in any given scenario. And sometimes you will have to decide, because if you do the thing A, the thing B is gonna happen. If you do the thing B, the thing A is gonna happen, like the counter for the given thing. Yeah, I messed it up. So let's say if you play a thing A, then the counter A is gonna happen. If you do the thing B, the counter B is gonna happen. So assuming your opponent will always have a counter to your play, you just have to choose the play that will have the least negative impact, or rather the most positive, depending on your hand and on your situation. And it all goes down to what kind of deck you are playing. If you are playing aggro decks, you just want to make as much damage as possible. If you are playing control deck, you want to remove as much creatures of your opponent as possible, or protect your face as much as possible. So yeah, that's basically it when it comes down to the situational. And the last one, unless you want to expand on the analysis. Yeah, so if you want to expand on the analysis, then feel free to ask more center-end question, and if not, then I will just go for the last one, because the last one is really easy to explain. Okay, nope. So for the last one, what to do with bad draw? So it's not a stupid question, but it's not something that you have influence of. That's the, well, maybe not the beauty, but it's something that the game, card games are condemned in the esports scene, so the randomness. So there will be card games like Hearthstone where there are more random, and there will be games like Shadowverse, which is less random, or games like Vent, which is hardly random at all. So the bad draw will happen in any of the card games, because drawing cards is something that goes with it. Like, of course, we can also assume that poker, if you play poker like Texas Hold'em, you can just forfeit your hand, and you can play the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and you can forfeit as many hands as you want, unless you will get the hand that you want to fight with. But that's not a thing, that's not the kind of randomness that goes with the tempo-based card games. So both Hearthstone, Shadowverse, Elder Scrolls Legends, Duelist, these are the tempo-based card games. And usually you will draw one card per turn, like at the beginning of your turn you will draw a card, or at the end of your turn you will draw one card, or just given amount of cards. And if you have bad draw, it's just a bad luck. It's nothing you can do about it. The only thing that can change it would be changing the deck, because if you consistently get a bad draw, so hands that break, so for example you get too much of a removal, or you get too much of expensive creatures, or you don't get enough creatures for the early game, the problem might be with your deck. But if the deck is proven to be working, then bad draw, well, you just have to brush it off. Sometimes it will happen, and yeah, it might be salty, it might be really frustrating to just get screwed over and over by just not drawing correct cards, but, well, that just happens, and that's it. So that would be it for the bad draw. Just covering it. Yeah, I agree, that's one of the most frustrating parts of the card games, so that's why a lot of decks are consistent. So they're either consistent in the mana curve, so they have a lot of cards for any given turn, so turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, they have a lot of good cards that can be played, so they will rarely bleak. The most common brick deck would be Dragoncraft, I believe, because with Dragoncraft, if you draw all of your expensive stuff, you just cannot play. You just can't play any card out of your hand, and it's nothing you can do about it. You just sit and watch your opponent destroy you. And yeah, it's a cry-worthy moment, but that's the risk with playing the deck. When the deck relies on super big creatures and ramp, there have to be downside. Because if there wasn't any downside, the ramp dragon, the deck would be extremely powerful. But that's one of the things that's stopping the win ratio down. Sometimes it's just a card draw, and that's one way of balancing the game. So I guess that would cover all of the questions that you sent me before. So if you have any for now, then it would be a good time to ask them. If not, then we can just, well, then I will send you a link to the book I mentioned before, because I found it. Yeah, and I will also send it on Facebook. Like, it's one of the books that I always send to people because it's really good. It's just good. Okay, start net decking. So, I have no idea how is your current vial state, but if you want to play Shadow, I would just recommend playing Midrange Shadow, like the one that's not neutral. So, for example, from the link I send you, this is one of the more successful lists at the moment, and it's really different than the one you had. So, for example, this list. This is the list that you can try ladder with. Okay, you have 8,000 vials. That's fine, but the other thing is the expansion is coming, and that might be a problem, because with every expansion there will be a lot of cards that you will just have to craft, because the meta will change and the new cards are usually more powerful than the ones before. Like, let's just see at Wonderland Dreams meta. Every deck had to craft Alice, every deck had to craft, like, every Blood at the beginning had to craft Abyss for their decks, every Heaven had to get Snow Whites, so that's a lot of expensive cards. And the same situation will be, like, for sure with the Starforged Legends. People will just open packs over and over, try to get Legends. So if you have enough dust, or if you have rather vials for the deck I send you, you can simply create it. And if you want to try the other deck, I would recommend the Neutral Haven, because Neutral Haven is just Neutral Haven. It has a lot of neutral cards, and you already showed that you have neutral cards in a collection, like by just showing the previous deck. So I send you another one. So these are the two links that you can check out. You can also create a deck code on the site, but I suppose you are familiar with the site, so that's not gonna be a problem. And then you can just play them on ladder, and it will be good. I see you have Aegis. Aegis is not good at the moment. Aegis is a little bit slow. Okay, I see you have every card for the Shadow deck. It's probably perfect. So you didn't have to spend anything at all. You're making space from your deck. Oh, you had full space. Okay, I got it. Okay, still waiting. So he's making decks, fine. Said lack of microphone is something that really hurts. Oh, whatever. Okay, so also my question would be, because like I said in the first message, I usually split the sessions like for two, for the Bega Mooney, so I'm making two of them student. Is there any chance that you will be able to acquire or borrow even the simplest microphone for the next session? Or maybe even use your smartphone. I don't know if you have smartphone. I assume so, because smartphones are super common nowadays. You can also talk via Discord application on your phone. I forgot, I totally forgot it at the beginning of the session, but yeah, this was also a possibility. that you don't have to use the Discord on your PC. It can be also a Discord on the phone, but it depends if you have one or not. Because obviously we can do another session like this, the next one, but well, it would be way better if I could hear you, so then we could actually talk instead of I would just read messages and answer. Because it's just hard, and if you would go to on ladder right now, just exchanging the information can make a lot of weird things. Because while talking, you can still concentrate on the game, you can still click on your game, and while writing a message, and so you would write a message, I would answer something, there is a delay, so there is a delay between the screen spectator, there's a delay in the Discord, like a little delay, but still, instead of, we would just talking via voice, and then that we would have a lot less time than supposed to make a turn, and if turn make some, I don't know, if a turn would require some fast plays, or if a turn would require a lot of actions, or if you would find a question that would be need to answer immediately during any given turn, or just asking about the trade and such, or I don't know, maybe I would say something that that you could not understand, and or maybe you would misheard me, and you would need to ask once again about like what to trade, what to do, what to attack. Or I would be unclear in my intentions and I would have to explain myself over and over. With the text messages, it's just not gonna work. I'm talking from experience because I already had students like this with some games, and it's just not gonna be efficient, and it's just not gonna amount to anything if we would go on ladder with the texting. Okay, that's fine. I mean, like I said, it can also be a smartphone application, because if you install Discord on a smartphone, there is a chance, if you have smartphone, once again, because I don't know if you have or not, whatever. If you have Discord on your phone, then you can just use your phone, and it's really easy. If not, then there is a high chance that you have a friend or someone who have a microphone. It can be the simplest microphone possible, like they don't cost too much. I don't know what are the prices in your country. In Poland, where I live, you can get a microphone like the simple one for something like $1. Of course, the quality is gonna be not good, like the quality is gonna be bad, but it's enough to just hear another person. And also, I assume, other than the Baigum session or the session we'll get, if you get a microphone for yourself, it's just gonna be handy, I don't know, maybe for other computer games or just talking with your friends and such. Well, there is a lot of things you can do with microphone, so it's always good to have one. So it wouldn't be wasted money anyway. But just coming back to, like to sum it up, I suppose, I don't know, if you have no other questions for now, then I guess we can end the call, and I will just write to you when can we schedule the next one, so we can set up another session. Is it fine for you? Great. Then, well, have a good night, and I will talk to you later. See ya. Okay, so that would be it for the Discord. Obviously, once again, this session wasn't as efficient as it could be, but I tried my best to cover it. So if you're watching on Facebook, then you probably saw the promotion post. If you're watching on Twitch, then you can always order your lesson on Gamer Sensei. Or you can go to the Baigum University and get some special discounts, or rather, well, Baigum University is free after all, but if you want some extra hours, then Gamer Sensei is a way to go. So thank you for coming, and well, also have a good day and good night. See ya.